Welcome, and thank you for joining us for an OnBoard limited release presentation for insurers. This presentation will provide insight on an early component to our business information system, an initiative we're referring to as OnBoard limited release, previously known as OnBoard 1.0. To start, we'll provide a project overview. We'll go through a basic timeline so you'll understand what's coming and when to expect the full system. We'll detail what OnBoard limited release is, why we are doing a limited release, and what processes limited release will change for the insurer community. We will share a walkthrough of the submission process for completing a prior authorization request, or PAR, in limited release. And finally, we'll provide you with some helpful resources. So let's go ahead and get started. We have recently communicated about OnBoard with a new video, webpage, frequently asked questions, and emails, so some of you may already be familiar with what OnBoard is. But if you're not, you may be asking yourself, what is OnBoard? OnBoard is the system the Workers' Compensation Board has been developing to modernize workers' compensation system processes in New York State, changing the way stakeholders interact with the board and with each other. Along with our integration partner, CapTech Consulting, OnBoard will replace our current paper-based systems, such as eCase and CIS, with a brand new single web-based platform. This system will improve and expand access to real-time claim data with new electronic self-service features to improve and simplify interacting with the board and virtually eliminate the paper forms currently used. This will improve system responsiveness to stakeholder needs and ultimately lead to providing New York State's injured workers with greater access to benefits and medical care. This multi-year project initially began in the summer of 2019, with the full system being available in mid-2023, but we identified opportunities to implement some early process improvements and functionality sooner in what we are referring to as OnBoard limited release. OnBoard limited release is scheduled for release during spring of 2021. In mid-2021, Phase 2 will be available, which includes eClaims EDI 3.1. The complete OnBoard system is expected to release in mid-2023. As I mentioned, the first rollout, called limited release, will go into production and used in spring 2021. Let's go over why we chose to do a limited release and the reasoning behind our focus on the processes this early release will contain. On January 1, 2020, the expanded provider law went into effect and expanded the types of medical providers authorized to treat workers' compensation. With more providers able to treat injured workers, we expect a significant increase in the number of registrations the board will receive. Due to the increased registrations, the number of providers authorized to treat workers' compensation will grow, and ultimately these improvements will greatly increase the number of forms received and processed. In order to successfully manage these processes efficiently and successfully, limited release focuses on the automation of provider authorization requests, referred to as PARs, and the submission of HP1s, Request for Decision on Unpaid Medical Bills, noting that the only change to the HP1 process is the submittal, and in limited release, the rest of the HP1 process is remaining the same as it is today. All improvements have been designed to make it easier and more streamlined for everyone to participate in the workers' comp system. OnBoard limited release will facilitate electronic communications for the PAR process and all parties involved, and immediately upon rollout will replace the following paper forms: the attending doctor's request for optional prior approval and carrier's employer's response, Form MG1. Very important note here that with OnBoard limited release, the MG1 process will be optional for providers, but will now be mandatory for insurers. The attending doctor's request for approval of variance and carrier's response, Form MG2, and the attending doctor's request for authorization and carrier's response, Form C4A. With these forms now going online, insurers will no longer use paper or faxing for these processes. To transition away from paper forms, limited release will move the prior authorization request or PAR process completely online and will include the following. The existing MG1 process will be known as confirmation in the new system and will be confirmation that the treatment the provider wishes to deliver is consistent with the medical treatment guidelines. MG2 will be known as variance. Special services, which includes the 12 medical treatment guideline related requests previously done using C4 Auth, and greater than 1,000 will be used for non-MTG treatments costing more than $1,000. One of the features of the new system is that a provider no longer needs to know the form they have to fill out for their request. And as you'll see here in a few minutes, the new system will use a TurboTax approach, asking the healthcare provider questions that will lead them down a path to the correct PAR submission type. Part of OnBoard limited release will be the introduction of a durable medical equipment or DME fee schedule that certain types of DME will require. There will also be a PAR for non-MTG treatment costing $1,000 or less, and new medication PARs, as OnBoard limited release will be replacing the current drug formulary prior authorization request process. Similar to the current drug formulary prior authorization process, all completed PAR submissions will be transferred to the eCase folder. What benefits can insurers expect when using limited release? Insurers will be able to act on appropriate and correct information as the system automatically validates data and triggers action. This will reduce duplication and streamline the process. Insurers will be able to easily see their submissions and requests on a concise dashboard, giving you 24/7 access to your queue of active submissions and requests to view and take action on. Throughout the process, insurers also have the ability to receive email and text message status updates on PARs in progress. And lastly, insurers will be able to communicate directly with providers concerning a PAR. Others will benefit from limited release as well. Healthcare providers will benefit with easy submissions and a simple review process. Injured workers will receive more timely health care. The Board Medical Director's Office will also be using OnBoard limited release for the reviews that they perform. The process flow in OnBoard limited release is very similar to what is now being done for a medication prior authorization. It will start by accessing the medical portal. The user will perform a case search and then answer a series of questions related to the case and the type of care the provider wants to provide. The request will be submitted, and the system provides auto-routing and automatic timing associated with the request. The request will automatically navigate the review process within the system. Now that we've gone over OnBoard and what to expect with limited release, we want to give you an example of the submittal and response process for a prior authorization request in the new system. The screenshots that will be shown here during this walkthrough are not final and are subject to change. However, these will give you a sneak peek at how the web-based system will look, how you will navigate it, and the steps you will take to complete a submission. So with that as background, I'd like to do a high-level walkthrough of the PAR submission process, followed by the insurer's response. As a reminder, the screens you'll see are prototypes that are under development. And also know that we'll be rolling out a complete training program with final screens and descriptions as we get closer to implementation of OnBoard limited release. As a refresher, OnBoard limited release is focused primarily on prior authorization requests. These requests include MG1s, optional prior approvals. Again, optional for the provider, but mandatory response from the carrier. MG2s, medical treatment variance requests. C4 auths, non-MTG body parts and special services. DME prior auth, non-fee schedule items as well as certain items that are on the fee schedule. And formulary prior auth, non-formulary medications. With OnBoard limited release, prior authorization for medical marijuana will be processed as a medical prior authorization, no longer on an MG2 as it is today. I'd like to start by walking you through the provider process for context and how this process connects with the response process for insurers. Providers will begin their PAR request by accessing the medical portal. On this page, there will be a link in the treatment section for a prior authorization request. When entering OnBoard, providers will be presented with their home screen dashboard, which will serve as the starting point for their submissions. Providers will be able to easily view the status of items already submitted, and hyperlinks will take them directly to a specific submission once selected. If someone is a delegate for multiple providers, the status of all provider submissions will appear on their dashboard. To begin the prior authorization request process, providers will select the Submit an e-form button on the top right corner of their dashboard. The next step is to enter requester information. A few notes on this. When a provider is assembling a PAR themselves, their own information will be defaulted and automatically populated on this initial page. If it's a delegate working with multiple providers, he or she would need to select which provider the request is being submitted on behalf of, as well as the associated provider license if there are multiple for the provider. Similar to the current formulary prior authorization system, providers begin by completing a claim lookup. This is done by entering either the WCB case number or the carrier case number. Next, the user will enter information in two of the following: date of injury, last four of Social Security number, date of birth, and/or the patient's last name. Next, the user will select the category of PAR they wish to submit, whether that be drug formulary, DME, other treatment or testing, or non-medical. After a category of PAR is selected, the system will ask a series of data-driven questions, such as CPT code for the requested procedure, code lookup dropdown, enter a portion of the code or the name of the procedure and then select from a list, the MTG site, MTG reference code or description associated with the PAR, again this will be a type down lookup list, the body part associated with the PAR, and whether the requested treatment or testing is addressed by and consistent with the MTGs. This completes the process of how an individual PAR is assembled and ready for submission. The provider or delegate then has the ability to continue to assemble additional PARs on the same patient on the same case. For example, a surgery with subsequent DME and physical therapy, which are all different PAR types, can be assembled and submitted together. This new process makes it virtually transparent to the user that they have submitted different PAR types that use different e-forms and take different pathways. When finished, the provider would then select the Complete Request button at the bottom of the page. On the left of the Request Details screen, the user is provided an outline of the PAR submission so they know where they are in the process. In this instance, since DME was added, additional details are needed. The user enters these additional details to continue. On this screen, you will see that an additional item has been added to the request. Item number 1 was for an MG1 consistent. Item number 2 is for durable medical equipment. From here, the user can continue and add additional items or complete the request and finish the prior authorization. Once the PAR is submitted, users will see the status of that PAR on their dashboard. This dashboard is considered the home screen for OnBoard limited release. From here, the user can submit another request or see the status of requests they have already submitted. The ability to sort and filter is also available. You can sort by prior auth ID, type of PAR, patient, patient date of birth, carrier case number, WCB case number, last activity, and prior auth status. On the left side, under the column Prior Auth ID, you'll see hyperlinks. These will take you directly to the associated PAR. Now that we've shown you the process of how a PAR will be submitted to you in the system, let's walk through an insurer's response to a submitted PAR. When insurers enter the system, they will directly select on a PAR Auth ID to take action on that PAR. For today's example, we'll be selecting the highlighted PAR for durable medical equipment. When clicking on the PAR ID link, insurers will begin their response. In this example, the PAR selected was for durable medical equipment. A series of items is shown regarding the PAR, including the body part, the associated medical treatment guideline, HCPCS code, and the Level 1 insurer response. The insurer will place in their response. In this example, they will grant and answer the series of questions shown. The insurer will then provide further details that will denote if the claim is apportioned, the amount or percentage covered, and the insurer name, title of the reviewer, or other title. The next step is to upload any supporting documentation needed. Lastly, the insurer will review and submit their response. All details previously entered in the form fields will be shown here, and you have the ability to edit as needed. When a PAR gets submitted by a provider, the system will automatically route it to the correct location, removing the need for a fax number. I'd like to walk you through this example of auto-routing and auto-escalation by using the formulary review process as an example. PARs will follow the same levels, starting with the prior authorization being initiated with the prescriber. Then the Level 1 reviewer will approve, partially approve, or deny. It will go back to the prescriber for review and either be approved for injured worker treatment or continue through to Level 2 for approval, partial approval, or denial. Again, it will go back to the prescriber to either move on to injured worker treatment or a Level 3 review. Remember, specific prior authorization request timelines will be the same as they are today. This is an example of the review process. As we move closer to using limited release, the board will be providing plenty of opportunities to receive updates and training. We will be hosting a monthly webinar series where we will walk you through presentations just like this one. More information on these monthly sessions will be announced soon, so keep an eye out for that. Just prior to OnBoard limited release being available in spring of 2021, we will be providing just-in-time training webinars to provide you with everything you need to know for day one. Fact sheets, training guides, and video tutorials will also be developed, and website content is being continuously refreshed to assist you along the way. And down the line, we'll be providing you with support channels so you know where to get assistance if needed. So what do you need to do now to prepare? You should conduct a review of any current systems and procedures to identify potential impacts. After going live with OnBoard limited release, the board will no longer be using paper for PARs, so please ensure your procedures are in place for day one. We also encourage you to review the OnBoard webpage. The content featured there will provide you with an understanding of the changes associated with OnBoard limited release. We hope that this walkthrough helped give you an idea of what to expect with limited release. For more information, you can go to the OnBoard webpage at wcb.ny.gov/onboard, where you can find an overview and timeline, FAQs, and additional resources. This is also where you can subscribe to receive OnBoard news straight to your inbox for both OnBoard limited release and the larger OnBoard project. That concludes today's presentation, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email onboard@wcb.ny.gov. Thank you for your interest in OnBoard limited release, and have a great day.